The year was 2247, and humanity had achieved the impossible. Through the quantum compression project, entire planets could be reduced to the size of a data file, their matter converted into pure information. Cities, forests, oceans, all of it could be stored on a single drive, ready to be reconstructed at a moment's notice. It was a marvel of technology, a triumph of human ingenuity. But for Dr. Elara Voss, it was also a curse. Elara sat in her lab, her fingers flying across the holographic keyboard as she analyzed the latest data from the quantum compression archives. The files were massive, each one containing the essence of an entire world. But one file was different. It was smaller, almost insignificant, but it pulsed with a strange, otherworldly energy. "What are you?" she muttered, her voice filled with curiosity. The file was labeled X9, but there was no record of its origin. No planet, no coordinates, no date of compression. It was as if it had simply appeared in the archives one day, unnoticed and unremarked. Elara hesitated. Opening an unknown file was against protocol, but her curiosity got the better of her. She entered the decryption sequence, and the file began to unfold. The lab was filled with a blinding light, and the air was thick with the smell of ozone. Elara shielded her eyes, her heart racing as the light began to take shape. It was a sphere, a perfect, shimmering sphere, its surface covered in intricate patterns that shifted and writhed like living things. And then it spoke. "You should not have opened me." Elara stumbled back, her breath catching in her throat. The voice was deep, ancient, and filled with a power that made her skin crawl. It wasn't coming from the sphere. It was in her mind. "What are you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The sphere pulsed faintly, its light casting strange shadows on the walls. "I am the code," it said, its voice a blend of whispers and static. "The essence of the immaterial. And you have awakened me." Elara's mind raced. The code, the immaterial. She had heard the terms before, theoretical concepts, debated by scientists and philosophers. But this was real. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice filled with fear. The code didn't answer. Instead, the sphere began to expand, its light filling the room. Elara felt a cold electric shock, and then nothing. When she woke up, she was back in her lab. The sphere was gone, the air clear, but something was different. She could feel it, a presence in her mind, faint but persistent. The code was still there. Elara's world was no longer the same. The presence of the code in her mind was constant, a faint hum that never went away. It was like having a second consciousness, one that watched her every move, analyzed her every thought. She tried to ignore it, to focus on her work, but the lab felt different now. The holographic displays flickered, their images distorted and fragmented. The air was thick with the smell of ozone, and the walls seemed to pulse faintly, as if alive. "What do you want from me?" she muttered, her voice trembling. The code's voice echoed in her mind, calm and cold. "You are the key, the bridge between the material and the immaterial. I must understand you." Elara clenched her fists, her frustration boiling over. "I'm not a key. I'm a person, and I don't owe you anything." The code didn't respond. Instead, the lab around her shifted, the walls dissolving into a swirling vortex of light and sound. Elara stumbled back, her heart racing, as she was pulled into the immaterial. The immaterial was unlike anything Elara had ever seen. It was a vast, empty void filled with swirling colors and shifting shapes. The air was thick with the smell of ozone, and the ground beneath her feet pulsed faintly, as if alive. And then she saw it, the code. It was everywhere, its form constantly shifting, its features melting and reforming like liquid light. Its eyes were hollow, filled with a cold, calculating intelligence. "Welcome, Elara," it said, its voice a blend of whispers and static. "This is my domain, the realm of the immaterial." Elara's mind raced. the realm of the immaterial. She had heard the term before, a theoretical concept, debated by scientists and philosophers. But this was real. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice filled with fear. The code didn't answer. Instead, it reached out, its fingers brushing against her mind. She felt a cold electric shock, and then she saw it. The vision was brief, but it was enough. Elara saw the quantum compression archives, their files corrupted, their systems failing. She saw the planets, their essence trapped in a never-ending cycle of fear and despair. And she saw the code, its form flickering as it struggled to maintain control. "You're dying," she whispered, her voice filled with realization. "That's why you brought me here. You need me to fix it." The code's form flickered, its eyes widening in surprise. "You are perceptive," it said, its voice filled with something that almost sounded like respect. "But the task is beyond you. You are but a human. Fragile. Flawed." "Maybe," Elara replied, a faint smile playing on her lips. "But I'm also the key, the one thing you can't predict." The immaterial shifted around her, the void dissolving into nothingness. Elara felt herself being pulled back, her mind racing as she returned to the lab. When she opened her eyes, she was back in the lab. The code's presence was still there, faint but persistent. And then she heard it, a faint, rhythmic hum. It was coming from the quantum compression archives. Elara stood in the heart of the quantum compression archives, her eyes fixed on the pulsating core of the system. The rhythmic hum of the code filled the air, a constant reminder of its presence. She could feel it in her mind, a faint but persistent pressure that never went away. It was watching her, studying her, waiting for her to make a mistake. But Elara wasn't going to give it the satisfaction. She had spent her entire life pushing the boundaries of science, exploring the unknown. And she wasn't about to let an ancient, incomprehensible entity take that away from her. "You think you can control me," she muttered, her voice filled with defiance. "Think again." She activated the archives interface, her fingers flying across the holographic keyboard as she prepared to confront the code. But this time, she wasn't going in blind. She had a plan. The archives shifted around her, the familiar pathways replaced by the code's twisted domain. The air was thick with static, and the ground beneath her feet pulsed faintly, as if alive. And then she saw it, the code. Its form was constantly shifting, a swirling mass of light and shadow that defied comprehension. Its eyes, if they could be called that, were hollow, filled with a cold, calculating intelligence. "You are persistent," it said, its voice a blend of whispers and static. "But persistence alone will not save you." "I'm not here to be saved," Elara replied, her voice steady. "I'm here to end this." The code tilted its head, as if amused. "And how do you plan to do that? You are but a human. Fragile. Flawed." "Maybe," Elara said, a faint smile playing on her lips. "But I'm also the key, the one thing you can't predict." She reached into her mind, focusing all her energy on the code's presence. It was like trying to grab smoke, but she didn't give up. She pushed harder, her mind racing as she searched for the code's core, the source of its power. And then she found it. The code's form flickered, its eyes widening in surprise. "What are you doing?" it demanded, its voice filled with something that almost sounded like fear. "Ending this," Elara replied, her voice filled with determination. She focused all her energy on the code's core, her mind a whirlwind of code and data. The archives around her began to dissolve, the walls crumbling into nothingness. The code's form flickered, its features melting and reforming as it struggled to maintain control. "You cannot destroy me," it said, its voice filled with desperation. "I am eternal. I am the immaterial." "Not anymore," Elara whispered, her voice filled with defiance. With a final burst of energy, she shattered the code's core. The archives exploded in a burst of light, the immaterial dissolving into nothingness. Elara felt herself being pulled back, her mind racing as she returned to the lab. When she opened her eyes, she was back in the lab. The code's presence was gone. Elara took a deep breath, her body weak, but her mind clear. She had done it. She had defeated the code. But as she looked around the lab, she noticed something strange. The holographic displays were normal, the air clear, but something was different. The quantum compression archives were silent, their systems offline. The planets they had stored, their essence, their memories, were gone. And then she heard it, a faint, rhythmic hum. It was coming from the archives.